in the game, as a competitor, you can feel the energy swing back and forth.
The ball's knocked loose inside the 35, scooped up by Musso at the 40, left side to the 50.
I could feel us suck the energy out of the stadium and out of the players.
You look up at the scoreboard in the third quarter and it said make some noise when the offense was out there, and literally no one was making any noise, and that's the best feeling in the world.
We didn't take a step back. We continued to uphold our defensive standard, and we put our foot on the throat and kept going.
A very happy head coach Paul Chryst walking into an even happier locker room Saturday afternoon inside Spartan Stadium. Hi everyone, with Matt LePay, Mike Lucas, I'm Chris Hall. This is Badger Breakdown for the next 10 minutes, and for the first time, I am acknowledging the timer. We're going to start it now. Boom, right there, it begins. We're going to talk about the state of the team, sitting at 4-0, the first test, guys, the teeth of the schedule. Biggest surprise for you, the fact that a redshirt freshman in Alex Hornibrook went into Spartan Stadium and that offense walked out of there looking unfazed, or the fact that the defense kept Michigan State out of the end zone. Biggest surprise.
Probably more because of the circumstances. There were a lot of third and longs in that game, which you would think is not exactly the ideal scenario for any quarterback, but especially somebody making his first career start. Now, we sat here last week, we talked about how impressed everybody has been with the poise of an Alex Hornibrook, but still, you go on the road and you have the multiple 3rd and 10s and then some, and to convert it. His pass, he was perfect, 6 for 6, and any 3rd and 10 or longer, and the team hit on almost every one of those, able to convert first downs. That was the surprise to me, that they were able to still move the sticks, despite, as coaches would say, to use the old line, being behind the chains. They managed to keep possession of the ball. That one probably caught me off guard a little bit.
I'll present the other side of it.
Sure.
For the defense to keep Michigan State out of the end zone, to really take away the run, which is the lifeline of the Spartans and what they want to do to an opponent. They want you to flinch, and they do it with their tailbacks and their offensive line, and they pound the rock, but they couldn't do it against the Wisconsin defense. And then they were forced to throw the ball when they didn't want to. So they became predictable and allowed the Badgers to do a lot of different things on defense. That was so impressive. I don't think anyone nationally could have expected that to happen. For Michigan State to be shut down its home turf to the extent that it was.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that we're even having this discussion, I think, right now after just 4 games, talking about 2 very unique circumstances, both sides of the ball doing what they did in an environment where you may not think it would happen that quickly in a year. How is that setting this team up for not just this week, going back to the state, but the rest of the year?
Well, the term setting this team up, I mean, it sets it up for some really high-stakes games, potentially. I mean, this week obviously gets a lot of run. It's the first time that Michigan and Wisconsin have ever played when both are in the top 10. And I know it's still the month of September, but the fact remains these are 2 top 10 teams, and I think playing like it too. I mean, look, LSU is a soap opera right now, but I would still like to think that's a talented team that Wisconsin beat. Michigan State, I think, is a talented team. Wisconsin has been tested and has performed extremely well. Michigan, really its only test has been against Colorado here so far, and they eventually passed it. Took a little time to do it, but the way the Badgers are playing, the stakes are going to continue to rise if they keep playing well. That's how it sets up for this team. The good news is this team is staying pretty level, and that's rather than looking ahead and trying to dream the improbable dream, the way many people would put it. They're worried about getting better on Wednesday, getting better on Thursday, and then go playing eventually on Saturday.
They've become such road warriors, and I'll let you address the specifics, but I think a lot of that has to do with their exposure to some of the heavyweights in college football over the last 3 years, 2+ years. For the upperclassmen, I mean, they've played LSU twice. They've played Alabama. They played Auburn. They played Southern Cal. They're not intimidated by anybody, whether it's neutral site or on the road, and the record reflects that.
What is it, 8 in a row now, right? In true road games that the Badgers have won, in true road games that they've been able to get. So, you do something like that, that's a little bit uncommon.
Let's go back to that Road Warriors. I like that. I had a chance to sit down with TJ Watt earlier this week, and I asked him exactly how this defense, which you want to go on the road and win, you got to have that defense to do just what you said, stop that run, stop that momentum. How have they developed this chemistry so quickly with the defensive coordinator here in his first year?
Because when you're having fun, you're just flying around. It's like backyard football, in all honesty. It's like I said, Leo Musso, I didn't really even see the fumble. I didn't see Dakota force it or anything like that. I was on the ground, and all of a sudden I get up, and Leo's running the end zone. I'm literally smiling, trying to find a block. Just certain things like that where you're flying around, you're loose, you're having fun, where I'll set the edge and I'll look back and guys will just be flying to the ball. You'll have hats, white hats everywhere flying to the ball, and just, God, we are flying around today. We are just having fun, having a blast. Then you come to the sidelines and guys are laughing, like, nice hit, nice play, certain things along those lines. And it's huge, because if you're out there and you're, I don't want to be here, this sucks, we're not at home, we're not in Camp Randall, these fans don't want us here, it's going to reflect in your play. So I think really good teams find a way to have fun, and I think that really helps when you have great chemistry. Our guys, we love being around each other, and that's completely 100% honest. We really care about each other on and off the field, and I think that's a really big part in our success.
TJ Watt, nice enough to sit down with me way back on Monday morning. It really, guys, comes back to confidence. I don't care whether it's Justin Wilcox coaching them up, as TJ said, or head coach Paul Chryst. This team is confident. That's dangerous, no matter where you're playing.
Yeah, I think this team thinks it's pretty good because it has been here so far, and that's good. And I think it's still a fairly quiet confidence. There's not a whole lot of pounding your chest and, hey, look at me, and that, because that's not who Paul Chryst is. And I think the team in many ways is a reflection of the head coach. But this is a team right now that knows that it's been playing some pretty good ball, and the program has been pretty good for a while. So, you know, you could get yourself psyched out going into the big house and 110,000 fans and all that, but I think these guys have done a pretty good job of embracing this kind of stuff. Going to need to this week, but I think recent history with this team this year, and even going back to last year, tells you that they embraced that pretty effectively.
And I don't know if camaraderie or chemistry is overrated. Depends on your perspective, I suppose. But if you listen to the coaches or even talk with the players, they like each other. Mm-hmm. This is a team that gets along. And I think that has something to do with how they respond during those times when they're not playing well. And we've seen it a couple of times this year, sporting adversity, whether it be LSU or Georgia State, and then they responded in a positive fashion.
I think each week it gets a little tougher and tougher in terms of what you put on tape. You can get coached a little bit differently. You can get scouted much differently. This week, guys, in order to go back to Michigan, practically the same flight we just took last weekend, and come back with a win again. This time it's the big house, and it's against Jim Harbaugh, who is essentially the personality of that team. The brand kind of goes around him. A much different test this week. Again, we said it last week, the biggest one of the season.
Yeah, it is, and there's one player that you really, I mean, there's a lot of players, but there's one that you better keep an eye on in this game. He wears number 5 for Michigan, Jabril Peppers. Talking with Paul Chryst this week, he said, look, if you're going to start having Heisman Trophy discussions, this guy, he probably ought to be near or maybe at the top of the list because he does everything. Defensive player, he can be a linebacker, he can be a safety, he can play offense. He's a terrific kick return guy, but he can come in and be a little bit of a one-man wrecking crew on defense, the way he can get after the quarterback, the way he can do any number of things. Look, Michigan is really good. Their quarterback, by way of perspective, his frame, it's about the size of Cam Newton. Now, they're not the same quarterback exactly, but a big guy, and Wilton Speight has been pretty good so far for Michigan.
And I think the real difference, at least on the offensive side, between Michigan State and Michigan is the offensive line. The Wolverines returned 4 starters. This is a good group. This is a Big Ten offensive line. The Spartans might get there at some point this year. They weren't there last Saturday, and that is why Michigan was able to run the ball so effectively last week.
And that was a question going in because, not unlike Michigan State, Michigan's been rotating a whole lot of guys in their tailback rotation, and it seems like right now, no matter who it is, there's a chance. So there's a little variety. You got a couple sledgehammers. You have a couple other guys who run it and get from point A to point B very quickly. But as Mike mentioned, there's a little more experience, or actually considerably more experience in that offensive line, and that's been big for Michigan so far.
And a great tight end. The best tight end in the Big Ten, maybe the best tight end in the country, in Jake Butt.
Yep.
I know 2 weeks ago, even though it's out of the coach's control, we talked about getting out of the game safe. Last week, we talked about shoring up the red zone. This week, little improvements, whether you know because you talked to coach about it or that you saw with your own eyes, little improvements that would give you more confidence heading into the big house.
Well, the one thing that they did last week, they took advantage of the short field. I mean, if you have a 5-yard drive, if you want to call it that,
Right.
28-yard and then a 28-yard drive after a turnover, defense scores a touchdown, but be able to continue to finish. I think of that first quarter touchdown drive that Wisconsin had where it took more than half of the quarter, a couple of fourth down conversions. They still have that capability of being a ball hog. Now that's going to be a little more challenging, I think, against this Michigan defense, but if they can approach those kind of numbers, just being able to sustain drives and get the touchdowns. I mean, you obviously want to do that more than the field goals. If you can continue to do that, then they've got every chance to go in there and get another one. Is unlikely maybe as a lot of people might have thought that would be not too many weeks ago.
And you have to manufacture your breaks. You talked about it last week, turnovers. They had 4 takeaways, really 5 because of the flubbed punt on the long snap.
Yeah.
Changes all the field position and the game.
And that was a block waiting to happen, right?
Yes.
I mean, they instead of 7, they may have gotten 2 off the safety, but I think that punter knew that the house was like collapsing on him. That was great special teams work.
Yeah, whether it was the 4 or +1 the 5, either way, they took advantage of all of them. Well, through 4 games, Wisconsin is undefeated. We've hit the mark here, doing Badger Breakdown in the 10 minutes as we promised. First day of October means a date with the Wolverines. And as always, we will be there making sure all of you who watch the show will know what's going on that day. For Mike, for Matt, I'm Chris. Thanks so much for joining us. More from Ann Arbor on Saturday afternoon.